Hello, everyone. Welcome to Q&A session 3. So I'd like to start things off with a little poll now. I know we asked this on the Discord banter chat, but I'd really like to understand what everyone's building, what kind of genre world everyone's building. So Perry, could you pull up the poll? So we can just do a quick poll and just check out what everyone's building. I think it'll be fun to see. And also it might help, understand where we can truly help you guys in terms of what um some of the questions that we might pose here might be more helpful for you, depending on the genre of world you're building. Yeah, so just simple choices. Are you making an escape room, platformer, RPG, shooter, narrative adventure, simulation, or others? If it's others, that's super interesting, and I'll be curious to know what you're making. So just feel free to type in the chat. All right, so just a little poll to get things started today. If once again, housekeeping, if you got any questions that pop up throughout the session, please just type it in the chat. We will get to it for sure. All right. Okay, to kick things off, my first question for you guys, Mondul and John. So the questions we have today are very much focused on multiplayer. So the first question I have here is regarding scaling multiplayer worlds. So how many players can ZEPETO handle in very large multiplayer worlds concurrently? How do I make sure that the performance is solid in these large multiplayer worlds? Yeah.
Right. So that's definitely a tricky one. We do have a maximum multiplayer count of 24 players at the moment. That's a relatively loose number. I mean, that could get higher or lower down the line, but it is currently 24. But because of as pretty as our ZEPETO characters are, and they people can dress them up like however they want, and I consider that a strength of ZEPETO. But because of that, each individual character that's loading into your world is very heavy. What that means is that you're going to have to account for the amount of we kind of talked a little bit about draw calls and poly counts and things like that during our optimization and policing kind of sessions. But you can kind of think about each character as having in the neighborhood of maybe about 40, 50 draw calls. And then in terms of poly count, something around the neighborhood of 50K tries per character, something around there. And that means that it'll stack up pretty high. And the more players you have, the less you'll budget you'll have to kind of work with. So in a general rule of thumb, I'd say between maybe 6 to 8 players would be as far as you'd want to push it at the moment. Maybe later on, if the ZEPETO models get a lot more optimized and a lot more performant, then you can think about adding more players. But I think keeping it somewhere around 4 to 6 players is or 6 to 8 players, but lower if you can manage it. But I mean, I'd say test with as many as you can. Try testing with 24, see how well you can run, and then if it doesn't work, then maybe you might need to tone it down. Yeah. Just a quick, I guess, tip is if you testing with multiplayer and stress testing it, right? It's difficult to do unless you have 24 devices laying around in your house, right? What you can do is you can just spawn in, grab different ZEPETO IDs, and then just grab 24 IDs and then spawn 24 characters in your world just randomly around the place and then see how well it runs. That could be a good stress test in terms of gauging performance and how well your world can run. But yeah, definitely keep it on the minimum, but push it as far as you'd like. Yeah.
Another quick tip that you can also try is this is something some people have tried before, which is like John is saying, those characters are super heavy. But what you can do is you can use the mannequin to actually apply a very simple costume. That costume could have basically take mannequin, strip your player of everything that they have, because they could have wings, they could have a bunch of crazy things that makes that poly count, like John is saying, 50,000 or more, and just replace that with a simple costume that everyone in your world has. So that's another option as well.
One more thing to add to that. If you're able, what you can also do is you can either create like a custom model, and like you can create your own custom character and design your own character controller. I mean, if you have the like knowledge to do so, then you can have your own like really optimized characters, and have those, and like you can still utilize 24 players just without the ZEPETO heavy models. And you can kind of go that road if you want. But yeah.
All right, awesome, guys. The next question is also kind of related to multiplayer. Actually, it's multiplayer as well. What are the most common issues to expect when you're trying to incorporate multiplayer into your world? Any specific, I mean, you mentioned already some kind of debugging and techniques that you would recommend. But yeah, what are the common issues and how do you kind of like mitigate those?
I'll start. I think that the biggest issue with multiplayer is knowing what it is you're supposed to sync and what it is you don't need to sync. So kind of differentiating like thinking in the multiplayer sense. Because when you're in the normally when you're designing any world or game, you're really thinking about it just from your perspective, right? What's happening on your device. But when you think about multiplayer, you also have to think about what's happening on everybody else's device. Then that comes into the issue where you're either syncing certain things incorrectly, or you're sending messages wrong, you're sending the wrong kind of data, you're syncing too much. Those kinds of things I think can kind of be an issue. So I think this is really something that comes like over time as you start working with the system. It's really not something that you're going to be able to, maybe I won't be able to explain in words exactly what it is you need to sync and what it is you don't need to sync. It's just going to have to come with just you getting your hands dirty and seeing how it works. But yeah, so I think that might be the most challenging part, is getting that kind of mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with what John is saying. Basically, it's gonna require you to. I mean, we can't really. There's no way to explain multiplayer in like 5 minutes. It's gonna just take you looking through the documentation, trying things. It is not easy. Definitely not easy. Even outside of ZEPETO, right? Like if you're trying to make a multiplayer game in any system, it's very challenging because of the very things John was saying. You have to not only think about what you're syncing, but what other people are doing. As far as like tips, if you do want to try it, if you just want to make like a hangout world where a bunch of people can show up in your world, hang out together, definitely use the module importer because it's made to sync transform. So it's basically meant to sync positions and movement. So it's meant for that. But if you want to do anything beyond that, which is like, I pick up a sword and someone, like everyone else sees me pick up that sword, and everyone else sees me like kill this monster or something like that, or something where you have to sync things, then that requires you sending messages, which is tougher, which is going to require self-study and definitely looking through the documentation. Yeah.
Cool. It's great. It's cool that you mentioned that, Mondo, because the next question is actually like kind of like people are saying they want to build something like a Roblox, right? Like basically or not like a Minecraft, sorry, where they can like build structures or like houses, and then people can visit each other, like The Sims, for example. Like, does the ZEPETO module importer like support that, or like is that possible to do so in a ZEPETO world?
So just to start off, what the module importer allows you to do is, let's say you have a world, and I join it, you join it, we all join it, we all see each other, we all move around, we see each other. So the module importer will do that. It will sync the positions. But if you're talking about like building a house, right? So basically building a house means that I build a house, I put the house down. My house could be red, it could be blue. These are choices I make for this house. That information needs to be synced to everyone else. So that's going to require you to actually send messages, keep track of like basically states of like each player, and sync that across the server. So that is not handled by the module importer. That will require you to, and we have documentation and tutorials about this for sure. You can definitely look through it. But yeah, you have to basically sync positions, or you have to sync data across the server. And you really have to do what John is saying, which is like you got to think about when you do something on your machine, it has to happen for everyone else as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a guide. We have, I think, a great guide that Mondel actually created, like kind of explaining the basic kind of concept of what client server architecture kind of works. So that's definitely going to be a huge resource. And as kind of scary as we try to make as we're making it sound right now, once you kind of get that basics down, that it becomes a lot easier to kind of start things, right? So then like if you're considering building a house, right, then I mean you have to think about, so the module importer will basically just sync positions and rotations, right? If things are moving around in your world, the module importer will be able to kind of make sure everything is in the right spot. The thing that you will have to do is if you're building an object, right? Let's say you put a block down, right? You have to tell, it's not just you spawning the block into the world, you have to tell everybody else where to spawn that block in so that their copy of your world and their copy of your character is putting a block down. So then you have to tell the server to tell everybody else that you're putting a block down as well. So that's just kind of the general like kind of mindset to have, but definitely take a look at the like general explanation video of client server architecture. I think that'll be a great first step.
All right, cool guys. All right, that's about the last question we have on multiplayer, but just to add on actually, because John, you mentioned about scripting. I mean, it just came to my mind. Is scripting in a multiplayer world very, very different from single player? Like does you mention, when you sync multiple states, does that affect the script that you write in any way?
Yes, it definitely does change the way that you're even designing your world. So if you're going to create a multiplayer game, you definitely have to know that you're doing that before you start development. It's going to be a lot harder to adapt your world into a multiplayer context after the fact, just because of the way that you're designing all of your code. Like for example, if you have different phases in your game, like if you're creating like a let's say you're creating like an FPS shooter, right? Then you have like this matchmaking phase where you're pairing different people together, you're creating your teams, and then from there you move into the gameplay, right? Then after that you go into the results screen, and then you go back to the lobby, right? If you consider that like your core loop cycle, right? Your gameplay loop, anyone at any point in time can join into your world at any point of those phases, right? Someone can join into your world while the gameplay is running, right? But from the perspective of someone just joining their world, you have to tell that person, that client, everything that has happened up till that point. So then you have to send that player and then have some sort of way to generate everything that's happened so far, so that that player is up to date on on what's going on in the server currently. So then how you're kind of going to communicate that to someone joining in the middle is another kind of thing that normally you wouldn't think about in a single player game, right? Because you don't have to worry about like someone joining in the middle of game because you're just playing the game. So it's things like that can make it a lot more complex. Yeah. So yeah, to answer your question, you do have to kind of keep in mind like it's definitely very, very different. There's different ways to approach the design of your code when you start from a multiplayer. Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, so it's very much very different, very complex, something you have to like decide like early on in your game development, world development stage, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, so I've actually got a couple of questions, three questions, I mean, that I've gotten from personal DMs. But so I'm gonna say them out here. So one question was, can I use a capsule as a player in my ZEPETO world? Yeah,
You,
that's the question.
you can. So basically what you would do, I guess the general concept without telling you the code that goes into it is if you have if you're spawning a character using the ZEPETO players, right? That's in documentation. How to instantiate your character into your world. Look at that documentation. But if you spawn a character through the normal methods, right? then you will spawn in a character that has like a body component. And like all of the stuff that's rendering into the screen, that's showing the character on the screen. What you can do is you can just disable all the visual elements of the character, and then you can child that capsule onto the character, right? And then effectively all of the character controllers will still be the same, like the jump button, and then like all of that stuff would still be the same, and you can just have a capsule as your character controller. It gets more complicated if it's not a capsule, but it's like another character that you're trying to add, right? So if it's not a capsule, but like you're trying to spawn in a different character, then you have to think about what animations are playing and things like that. Then if that is the case, I would probably recommend creating another model and then uploading that to ZEPETO Studio as an item, then using Mannequin to equip that item onto your character so that all of your bone structure, all the animations still run properly. It's just a different model that's being run on your character. So two approaches. If you don't care about all of like the visual like animation stuff, then just child it to your character and then disable all the other visual components. Or create a custom item, upload that to Studio, and then use that as your item through Mannequin.
Your custom item can even be a capsule, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You can use Mannequin to like like equip the capsule. But actually, I just want to comment because like I actually wanted to just say this is not like anything to help with the question in at all, but actually like I just want to say like capsule is actually my favorite thing to prototype with. Like if I have an idea for a game, I just actually just like to throw in a capsule, put on a character controller, and just play around with that. And if I can actually make the game fun with like a capsule, then I know that like the design of it is pretty good, right? Like it's fun without any kind of graphics. It's just literally a capsule. So yeah, I just want to comment about like I love using the capsule to just prototype. Yeah.
Right.
But even sometimes I've even had games where like the art itself was like a stylized, like simple, primitive kind of like art style. And the capsule actually kind of it kind of looks cool, like in that kind of like setting. So it could actually even work as a final look of your game.
Yeah, like those retro games, right? Like gameplay over graphics, man. That's the way to go, right?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. All right, cool. Another question. This might be better suited on the help desk. So one obstacle I face is I have trouble testing the game in Unity. It seems like when I enter play mode, it thinks I am already in the multiplayer server and doesn't spawn a new player in. Any advice on how to troubleshoot this? Maybe a bit tough without further context, but just give it a shot here. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, and maybe I missed some stuff, but I guess when you create the QR code and you try to enter the world, it doesn't spawn your character. Is that?
Yeah, it thinks it's already here. I'm already in the multiplayer server and doesn't spawn a new player in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I would probably, make sure that inside of your player data, so like when you're, it definitely depends on what you're using. I don't know if you have your custom code written for handling spawning of the character, but I'd make sure that there's an on leave like event that gets called when somebody leaves a server, right? My immediate thought is to double check if like the array that you're storing your characters in, right? Or like whatever map or array or whatever thing that you're using to track who's currently in the server. I double check to make sure that you're properly removing the character on leave so that when you respawn into the game, and if you have some sort of check, like if the character doesn't exist, then spawn the character in, double check that the character actually doesn't exist in your map. So kind of take a look into your on leave functions, and then see if all the logic is sound there. I think we have a couple examples on our Notion page that have implemented multiplayer in there. So kind of download those, clone those in, and see how the multiplayer is set up in those projects. And if you're using the module importer and then that's not functional, where if you're leaving and it doesn't like properly remove the character, you can report that as a bug in the module importer, and then they should be able to see that in the module importer, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so yeah, definitely take a look in those spaces. And if you're using module importer, report that as a bug and then see it, and then we'll kind of take a look at it. But yeah.
All right. Cool. Good advice. All right. That is the end of my list of questions for today's Q&A session 3. Thank you everyone for attending today's session. Do know that this will be recorded, and so you can view it back if you encounter, let's say you are not at the stage where you've encountered these issues or yet, you know, you can always refer back to this video at any time. All right, and always refer back to the Notion page and developer resources, because that is your first port of call. All right. All right, see you guys. We are about 2 weeks away to submission. So I know you're all busy developing. Any questions, again, feel free to reach out on the Discord channel, on our help desk, resources discussion, anywhere, as well as my DMs. All right, cool. Cheers, guys. Good day.
Bye everyone. Thanks for coming.
Bye, guys.
Bye.